Hi, everyone, and happy Thursday. I know that just over on Monday that you guys had talked about tiny habits and, the ABCs of them. And so I just wanted to talk a little bit about some strategies for coping with change. Sometimes changing habits or routines tends to bring some anxiety. And so I think that there's some great, like, anxiety can be a bad thing and it can also be a good thing. And when we're getting anxious and it's causing us to be nervous and tense and things like that, that's when it's bad. And so having some coping skills as we're changing some of our habits and doing some new routines and stuff, these might help to alleviate some of the anxiety that comes along with that. So one of the things I wanted to talk about was to pair some negative feelings with a go-to activity. So as you guys had talked about your anchor, your behavior, and your celebration, when you come up with some anxiety, you can also have a go-to activity. So if there's maybe too much on your mind, putting stuff down on paper tends to alleviate some of that anxiety. If you have too much energy or you feel anxious or you feel shaky, getting up and moving and doing something, going for a walk out in nature, we talk about a lot, but even just doing 10 jumping jacks in the house will help to alleviate some of that extra energy and that, nervous, anxious energy you have. If you're feeling tired or maybe overwhelmed, maybe you're looking at like these new habits or changing your routine and you're feeling tired or overwhelmed by that, getting up and stretching and actually allowing your body to find that rhythm will give you a little bit of help. If you're feeling sad or depressed, dancing is one of the best things to do to move and to get some of those endorphins released and get you kind of like moving around. And then I know one of the things I always suffer with is racing thoughts. I can't ever seem to just even calm myself down. I'm always kind of constantly thinking, I got to do this. I got to do that. I got to do this. This is going to happen to that. That's going to happen there. So they talk about one of the things to do is to do breath work. And I know Lily's talked about this a lot. And this is just more when you have those racing thoughts, sometimes I can put it down on paper, but sometimes my mind is racing so much that I can't even get it down on paper. So inhaling for 5 seconds and then holding for 5 seconds and then exhaling for 5 seconds and then holding for 5 seconds, doing what they call box breathing. And so the way that I like to do it is I like to think like along the inhale, I count the five, and then along the hold, count the five, and then along the exhale, count the five, and then along the hold, count the other five. And so, like, in my mind, it kind of helps me to kind of take things and go, okay, now I can breathe and maybe calm my mind down. And then one of the things also is that to activate the parasympathetic nervous system, if you make your exhale just a little bit longer than your inhale, it actually naturally activates that within you. So you inhale for five, hold for five, exhale for maybe seven, and then hold for another five. And that should help activate that parasympathetic, that rest and digest aspect of us. Um, I saw a quote as I was putting this together, and so I really liked it for this topic. And it says, what feels big right now won't feel so big later. And I can speak from my own personal experience. When I first started my journey in Ayurveda about 3 years ago, I had to have like a list taped to my mirror in my bathroom so I'd remember all the stuff for the morning routine. Now it is just second nature. If I don't get up and spray rose water in my eyes and scrape my tongue, brush my teeth, and oil my ears first thing, I can't even go downstairs and make my tea because I just don't feel like myself. So even though it felt so big at one point, it doesn't feel so big now later. And so I just like that. What feels so big right now won't feel so big later. And then I just had a few journal prompts. And so I'm just going to read the questions and then, we talk about those racing thoughts or overthinking or too much on your mind. And a lot of times that's when we're trying to change a habit or we're trying to impart new things into our life and we're overthinking it. We're like, oh, I could never possibly do that. That's going to take so much time here. That's going to cause me to forget this here. And so that overthinking, I think, is something, those racing thoughts, the overthinking, or just being like having so much on your mind. That's something that I think we can really get through and get past. And so some of these journal prompts might be really helpful. And so one of the first ones was list everything on your mind, and literally everything you can think of in a bullet form, like bullet point form. And so a lot of times I'll do that, and I'll do all the positive things in one column and all the negative things that I'm overthinking about in the other column. And then I can see like how much I'm letting my mind either think about too much negative or be so grandiose about the positive. Another one is write down your top 3 worries for the week and what you can do to manage or lessen these worries. And I think that's a really helpful one for a lot of people, because I know, especially now, kids are going to be out of school. And so if you have young children at home and stuff, you might be like, I'm not possibly not going to be able to get everything done this summer or even change anything this summer. And so when you start thinking about your worries at the beginning of the week and really how to mitigate them, I think that really helps. Another one is to write down a recurring negative thought and reframe it into something positive. And that's like basically like looking at something like, oh no, the situation's going to go like this, and then trying to reframe it and be like, no, it's actually going to go like this. And putting that positive spin on it is really helpful. And then another one is, what are 3 positive affirmations you can tell yourself to ease your overthinking? And I really like that because that's putting stuff in our toolbox. And then the last one is, if you had to rate your current anxiety on a scale of 1 to 10, where would it be? And what made you assign it this rating? And so really kind of, doctors ask you that all the time when you go in and you talk about pain. They ask you a scale of 1 to 10. So doing that with your anxiety can really help. There's also a Tiny Habits workbook, and I know you guys had, talked about the tiny habits and stuff. So I'm going to copy and paste that and put that onto school. And then he's got a couple of courses that he also offers, and some of them I found to be pretty interesting. They're all about like $200. Some of them are like 97. So, but I'll also post that on school so everybody could see those. And if there's anything that interests you or whatever, you could either bring it to the table in this group and we can talk about it and maybe get some more clarity. Or, it's also just a research and, some stuff for you to have in your toolbox. So, and then, like I said, I will put all that stuff on school. And if anybody has any questions, just let me know. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.